I grew up in a small town called Jeffreys Bay. It's in the Eastern Cape in South Africa. And when I was in high school, when I started, doing music and stuff, I wrote a song called Chosen to Be Here. It says, from the beginning, before time began, before the world was formed, I was chosen to be here. And I remember sitting in my matric class, my teacher used to say to me every day in Afrikaans, meneer Jansen, jy gaan dit nooit maak in die lewe nie. And every single day, she used to almost prophesy that over my life. And to so many of my friends in class, it sounded funny and people would laugh. But I remember the nights where I used to go home, I used to remember what she was saying, that you will amount to nothing. And how many of us, even in today's life and today's world, we hear that constantly. It might not be directly the way that my teacher told me. It might be through media, through a cell phone, through somebody, where somebody says you're not going to amount to anything, And again, I sit here today, testament of whatever she said, maybe in her ignorance. I never accepted it because I knew that God had a plan and He had a purpose for my life. So I want to encourage you today. God's got a plan for you. He's got a purpose for your life. And no matter what anybody says, don't believe the lie of the enemy. God bless.
Hello and welcome to Grace Generation Church Online. My name is Tom and I'm the pastor here. If you could take a few moments and send me a text or email me that says I watched, I'd really appreciate that. My email is pastortom@gracegenerationchurch.net, or you can text me at 509-291-8404. If you've been here for the last few weeks, you will know that we're in this teaching series called Games People Play. And today we're going to look at the game of Monopoly. In other words, we're going to be talking about money. Now, before you decide to turn this video off, I want you to know I'm not going to be twisting anybody's arm or trying to pressure you into giving any money. But I want you to know that as a pastor, I'm concerned about people who are going through financial difficulties and struggles. And as I see what is happening in our economy right now, I'm concerned because I think many more people will be facing those difficulties in the not too distant future. The good news is, when we have the right attitude about money, we aren't dictated to by the economy of our culture. Rather, we can rest in the economy of God. And in God's economy, the peace you experience over all things financial is constant, regardless of what the economy around you is doing. Today we're going to look at a parable of Jesus that He shared, and it gives us several lessons about money. Jesus had a lot to say about money. In fact, about half His parables that are recorded for us in the Gospels have something to do with money and possessions. Someone has said that one of every 6 verses in the Gospels has to do with money. It's said that Jesus talked more about money than He talked about the subjects of heaven or hell. So maybe we should ask the question, why is that? Why would He say so much about money? Well, maybe it's because we think about money more than we do about heaven or hell. Maybe it's because we spend so much of our time and energy dealing with the issue of money. How can I earn it? How can I invest it? How should I spend it? How can I earn more of it, right? It could be that Jesus talked about money a lot because He knew that money has an enormous influence on our lives. When we look at what is happening around us, it's easy to start feeling some fear and uncertainty when it comes to money. And if you listen to what they say on the news, well, you can hear everything from our economy is strong and all these financial problems are just transitory, and to, hey, you know what, you better stock up. The economy is going to collapse. The end is near. The truth is, nobody knows what's going to happen. The hope for the believer, though, is that even in difficult times, the Bible tells us how we should handle money in God's economy. So today I want to look at a parable that Jesus told that dealt with money. It's one of the most confusing parables Jesus used. It's recorded for us in the 16th chapter of Luke, and when you first read it, it appears that Jesus is commending someone for being a thief. It's a story about a dishonest money manager, and Jesus makes that guy out to be the hero. But it's a parable that can teach us a lot about the economy of God. So before we jump into the parable, let's get some context here. Jesus often used stories to teach, and often when He was teaching the masses. But the context of this parable is that He's not talking to the crowds, but rather to the religious leaders of the day, namely Pharisees. These were men who were self-righteous, legalistic, and judgmental. They were so obsessed with money. The Bible tells us that when Jesus told this parable, they just rejected it. Jesus knew this. He knew they loved money more than they loved God. And so that's probably why he made the crook out to be the hero of this story. So let's go to Luke 16 and start with verse 1. Jesus told this story to his disciples. There was a certain rich man who had a manager handling his affairs. One day a report came that the manager was wasting his employer's money. So the employer called him in and said, "What's this I hear about you? Get your report in order because you are going to be fired." So a couple of things we need to see here. One, the money manager isn't messing up with his own money, is he? He's wasting his employer's money. And the second thing is, he's gotten caught. See, the rich man had put his trust in this money manager, so much so that he evidently didn't even check up on how he was doing. But someone else figured out what was going on, and he went and told the rich man. So the money manager is confronted, and all of a sudden, he's given his final task. He has to pull together a report and give it to the rich man, and then he will be fired. He will be out of a job, and no one else will want to employ him because he's a crook. So, what would you do if you were in that spot? Well, listen to the plan that he devises here in verse 3. The manager thought to himself, "Now what? My boss has fired me. I don't have the strength to dig ditches, and I'm too proud to beg. I know how to ensure that I'll have plenty of friends who will give me a home when I am fired." So he invited each person who owed money to his employer to come and discuss the situation. He asked the first one, "How much do you owe him?" The man replied, "I owe him 800 gallons of olive oil." So the manager told him, "Take the bill and quickly change it to 400 gallons. You see what he's doing? He's just writing off half the debt. He shouldn't be doing this. It's not really his money, but he uses his last little bit of control he has over the rich man's money to secure his future after he's fired. He's buying influence in friends by doing this. So then he goes to the next creditor. "And how much do you owe my employer?" he asks the next man. "I owe him 1,000 bushels of wheat," was the reply. Here the manager said, "Take the bill and change it to 800 bushels. Then in the next verse, Jesus shows why he's telling this story to the Pharisees. The rich man had to admire the dishonest rascal for being so shrewd. And it's true that the children of this world are more shrewd in dealing with the world around them than are the children of light. Do you see what it says? The rich man had to admire the dishonest rascal for being so shrewd. Then in the second half of the verse, Jesus says that the people of this world are more shrewd or more prudent or wiser in dealing with the world than are the children of light. He's saying that sometimes in the area of handling money and wealth, unbelievers are better equipped and far wiser than believers are. Now, think about the word shrewd. What does it really mean? Well, for most of us, if we were to use that word, it would be in a derogatory way. If we were to use it to describe someone, we would be describing someone who has been a manipulator, a crook who got away with something, or a con man who ripped us off. But what does the word shrewd really mean? Well, if we look at the Webster Dictionary, it says it means someone who is marked by clever discerning, awareness, someone with common sense, someone who is creative and very artful in their dealings. Now, those are some good qualities to have in life, especially when it comes to handling money, and it becomes even more important when the economy starts to get tight. You need to be shrewd with your money. You need to get clever and discerning. You need to be aware of what is happening around you, and then you need to get creative when approaching and solving the problems that are coming. So understand, Jesus isn't saying that we should be dishonest like this guy is. He is saying we need to be shrewd. We need to be wise and clever. Reverend Martin Luther King was paying someone a compliment one day when someone near him heard what he was saying, and he said, "How can you say that about him? Don't you know he stands against many of the things that you stand for?" And the Reverend King said, "I don't judge others by the standards I set for myself. I judge them by how they live up to their own standards." Think about it. There are actors who live some very immoral lives. Nothing about how they live could be commended, but we can admire their skill as an actor. Some of the music that we really enjoy and listen to is performed by some musicians who are immoral and arrogant. Some of them live lives that are self-centered and propped up by drugs, but they still make good music. We can appreciate that about them. When my son was diagnosed with leukemia and we went to Seattle Children's Hospital, I never once asked if any of the doctors were atheist or Muslim or Jewish. I didn't ask them if they were Republican or Democrat. I didn't ask them if they were gay or straight. None of that mattered. What mattered was that they were the best at dealing with treating childhood cancers. It's the same here in this story. Jesus is saying we can learn from this crook because of the skill he was showing. We don't copy or commend his dishonesty, but we can study his shrewdness. So what can we learn from this story that Jesus told? What thoughts come to the surface as we study the shrewd servant? Well, this is actually the second week we've looked at this parable. Unfortunately, due to some conflicting schedules, I was unable to record that first teaching and post it online. But let me recap real quickly what we discovered last week. The first thing was, what I think I own is really on loan. Everything we have is God's. The money manager in this parable was mishandling the rich man's money and he got caught. We come into this world with nothing and we leave with nothing. Everything we think we own is really on loan. So if that's true, then it changes our attitude about money, and we discovered we can learn 3 things from this money manager about handling God's money. First, we need to look ahead. We need to be aware of what is happening around us and get informed about the challenges that are coming down the road. Then we need to make a plan. We need to be wise and prudent about how we're going to handle those challenges. Know what we are going to do before we have to face the challenges that we see coming at us. Then we need to act quickly. Get informed about the challenges and develop a plan. We do those things to meet those challenges, but they really won't help us unless we begin to act. We need to be quick and swift when it comes to implementing the plan. That's what we looked at last week. This week, I want us to see what this parable can teach us about the spiritual why we need to handle God's money wisely. Kind of the theology behind wise money management. So let's take a look at our first thought today. Here it is. God loans us money to use as a tool. That's really what money is. It's a tool. And tools are meant to be used, not loved. Money is loaned to us to be used. Look at what Jesus says here in the first part of Luke 16:9. I tell you, use worldly wealth. See, Jesus is saying use money. He doesn't say love money. He doesn't say worship money. He doesn't say hoard money. He says use it. So that leads us to the question, what's the best use of money? It's important we come up with an answer for that question. If Jesus said use it, we better know how we should use it. Well, the biblical principle would say, I use my worldly wealth to make an eternal difference. Or I use temporary resources, that's money, because there is no money that lasts forever. I use it for permanent good. I convert it from a temporary asset to an eternal asset. Let's think about that for a moment. Some things are far more important than money, aren't they? You can probably name a few. How about time? Time is more important than money. Do you think maybe Steve Jobs would have traded all the money he had for another year of life? See, the truth is that everyone watching me has a set time to live. And while you can always make more money, our days are limited. Hebrews 9:27 says, it is appointed for men to die once. You and I have an appointment with death. And I can guarantee you that's an appointment you won't be late for. I'm not sure how many more days you have left, but I do know that it's one less day than you had yesterday, and there is no amount of money that will extend it one day longer than when your appointed day is. Time is more important than money. So it would make a lot of sense for us to use our money to save time, wouldn't it? It's an excellent use of it. Every chance we have to save time, we should take it. Trade our money to create time. Because if you can save time, you are, in a sense, increasing your life. Now, we can certainly waste our time too. I'm as guilty as anyone else about getting caught in the Netflix binging vortex, right? I mean, all of us could create more time if we just got a little more discerning about what we watched on television. How many times have you watched a video and thought, well, there's an hour of my life I'll never get back? But today we're talking about money and saving time. Creating life is a wise use of money. There are many things that are more important than money, and that's our first thought. Money is a tool to be used for the things that are more important. Another thought that we see here is, if I handle a little well, God will give me more. Now, like it or not, how we handle the money that God has loaned us is a test. We see that here in this parable. Jesus says in Luke 16:11, whoever can be trusted with very little can also be trusted with much. And whoever is dishonest with very little will also be dishonest with much. Think about what he is saying here, because it applies to every area of your life. If you are faithful with small things, the things that on the surface don't seem to be all that important, God says he will give you more. In our parable here, it's obviously referring to money. If you are faithful at handling small amounts of money that God loans you, he will trust you with more. It's true with money, but it's also true with things like talent. If you've got a little talent and you're faithful with it, you nurture it and develop it, if you invest in it, you will discover you are entrusted with more talent. But take it for granted, and you'll never get any better than you are right now. In fact, many times you will lose what you have now. It's true with influence. Maybe God has given you influence over just one or two people. How will you handle it? If you use that influence wisely, you'll find that God will give you greater influence with more people. Jesus is saying here, how we handle money is a test. God loans it to us, and then he discovers if we can be trusted to manage it well. And if we are faithful in little, God can trust us with more. So the question is, are you faithful with the little you have? Do you ask him how you should handle it, or do you just blow it on what you want? Do you keep good records? Do you have some set aside for emergencies? Are you investing? One of the reasons I think God uses money as a test, because if we don't manage finances well, it's a pretty good indication that there are other areas of our lives that we aren't managing well. If you're watching me today and your finances are out of control, my guess is if you step back and get honest with yourself, you'd have to admit, my life is out of control. And if your life is out of control, you need a life manager, and his name is Jesus. And I'm not just talking about, yeah, I've received Christ and I know I'll go to heaven when I die. I mean, you need Christ to be in charge. We talk a lot about the fact that when you receive Christ, his Spirit comes and lives in you. He takes up residence in you. But we need more than that. He is a resident, that is true. But I'm talking about him becoming president. That means I don't call the shots anymore. He does. He has the final say on how I live. I follow his direction on how I handle finances and how I spend my time and who I date and who I marry. He's the final authority on how I raise my kids and how I live my life. That's part of what the Apostle Paul meant when he says, pray without ceasing. Because you are asking him about every detail of life. You are being trained by his wisdom, not the wisdom of the world. Too many of us aren't praying about anything. We are being unwise with our money because we don't stop and ask for God's wisdom on how to handle it. We see what we want and we buy it now and pay later, and it's not until the bills show up and we can't make the payments, then we start to pray. Oh, God, help me, I need a financial miracle. No, what you need to do is put God in charge of every part of your life and begin to handle his money well. My guess is everyone watching me would like to have more money. The Bible tells us how that can be a reality in our lives. Manage what you have wisely. Matthew 25:29 says, to those who use well what they are given, even more will be given, and they will have an abundance. But from those who do nothing, even what little they have will be taken away. That says it pretty plainly. God is watching to see what kind of manager you are with money. He is loaning it to you during your lifetime, and Jesus is saying God looks for faithfulness. He says if we are faithful in small ways with small amounts, then we will be trusted with more. But if we prove not to be faithful when we have small amounts, then even that what we have will begin to disappear. Or we could say, when we see someone whose life demonstrates consistent, ongoing fruitfulness publicly, we can be sure that privately, behind the scenes where no one sees, they are being faithful. They are doing things, to be quite honest, most people simply don't do. Private faithfulness produces public fruitfulness. People talk big all the time. They say things like, I can't really afford to give anything, but boy, if I had $1 million, I'd give a big chunk of it to the church. I'd help out all the homeless people, and I'd do a lot of good for other people. Makes me laugh inside, because I know that's simply not true. Look, you can talk all you want, but you wouldn't actually be any more generous then than you are right now. Because if you can't give anything today, you will never give anything to others if you're rich. If you can't be generous on $2,000 a month, you won't suddenly become generous on $20,000 a month. If you aren't faithful in small things, you can't be trusted with more. So, how are you handling the money God has given you now? Are you managing it well? Are you faithful in the small amount? It's important because if you're faithful with a little, God says, I'll give you more. Something else we can learn from this parable is this. If God can trust me with worldly wealth, God will trust me with spiritual riches. Have you ever wondered why some believers seem to walk in more of God's blessing and power than others? Often we see people like that and we think God just likes them better, or they just got spiritually lucky. Maybe we think, well, they've got a direct line to God that I don't have. So often people see that kind of a person and they begin to think, well, I've got to have them pray for me. If they pray for me, then God will listen. If they pray for my health issue, then God will heal me. Or if I can counsel with that person about my problem, God will give them the answer and then they can tell me. We think that way, don't we? We see these people who walk in God's power and we just think that it's random chance that they were chosen and I wasn't. What Jesus said here in Luke 16 gives us a different perspective on why we see those differences. He says how we handle the material wealth and money and resources that God has loaned us determines how much of the riches of heaven we can be trusted with. That's a principle that we can see stated over and over again all through the Bible. It shows us that more than anything else, how we handle money reveals how faithful we really are. Someone has said that the most sensitive nerve in the human body is the nerve that goes from your heart to your wallet, and that's true. Start talking about how somebody handles money and they get real sensitive, don't they? They start getting real defensive and they begin to tell you to mind your own business. But God says, it's not your money, it's mine. I've loaned it to you and I'm looking to see the people who are faithful in the way they handle it. Because if someone can handle this temporary, worldly stuff, then I know I can trust them with real riches. Those things of value that will last forever. Listen to how straight Jesus was about this in Luke 16:11. And if you are untrustworthy about worldly wealth, who will trust you with the true riches of heaven? Worldly wealth. What's that? It's money. It's the paycheck you get. It's the inheritance you receive when grandma passes away. It's the lump sum you get from that lawsuit that got settled. And Jesus says, if you handle it poorly, if you betray the trust God has placed in you, then don't expect to be entrusted with real riches. The Message paraphrase puts it this way. If you're not honest in small jobs, who will put you in charge of the store? I think that gives us a real good picture of what I'm talking about here. So many believers are consumers of God's blessing. What I mean is they have to keep going back to the store. They have to have someone else pray for their need. They want someone else to lay hands on them for their healing. They need a person of great faith to tell them the things that the Bible clearly states. And the truth is, God honors that. He can and does bless and minister to people through others. But he wants to be able to use you not only to do those things for yourself, but so that you can bless others too. So why doesn't that happen? Well, maybe it's because you can't be trusted with the keys to the store. Jesus said if you mismanage worldly riches, then you can't be trusted with true riches. So you have to just keep coming back to the store and do your shopping there. Look, one of the reasons I'm talking about the topic of money right now is because I see some difficult financial times ahead, not only for our country, but for the entire world. I am urging you to get your financial house in order, to get out of consumer debt and prepare so you can minimize the impact of the times ahead on you and your family. But the other reason is, and this is really a more important reason, I want you to experience more of God's power in your life. I want the people of Grace Generation Church to be people who are trusted with true riches, people who are faithful enough that God places the keys to the store in their hands. And there is a direct connection between the stewardship of God's money and being entrusted with the management of spiritual riches. The Bible also says, how I handle money is an indication of how spiritually mature I am. I know that there are a lot of difficulties and circumstances that people find themselves in that are often beyond their control. But most of the time, if a person's life is a mess and out of control, their finances are in a mess and out of control. People wonder why they are spiritually stuck. They kind of are in the spiritual doldrums and they don't know why. They say things like, it doesn't feel like God is with me. I pray and it seems as if no one is even listening. Or maybe one day I feel like I completely trust God and I'm full of His power, but then the next day I'm full of fear and anxiety and things feel hopeless. I feel like a spiritual pinball. Look, I know what that feels like because for a lot of years I lived like that. What I can tell you as your pastor and from my own experience and personal journey, check your bank statement. There's a direct connection between how you handle money that God has given you and how much you really trust Him. I've found the inconsistent giving produces inconsistent living. If my finances are unmanaged, then soon my life becomes unmanageable. Look, what I'm saying here is if we don't learn how to handle money, then we will miss out on some of the things God has provided for us. See, really, He doesn't want us to be satisfied with going to the store to get our blessings. He wants to give us the keys to the store. He wants us to be able to get true riches to handle. And He's graciously and patiently waiting on us to learn how to deal with worldly wealth. If we are going to be able to handle the more important spiritual riches, we need to make sure we are handling this relatively unimportant thing called money well. So if you want your enjoyment factor of your relationships with your spouse and your kids and your friends to go up, start managing the money God has given you well. That's why it's important that we take the time to see how the Bible tells us to handle money. Look, if you want to know any more about what the Bible says about how we should manage our worldly wealth, I have some free resources I'd like to send you. All you have to do is request them by sending me an email at pastortom@gracegenerationchurch.net or sending me a text at 509-291-8404. Also, if you're local, I want to personally invite you to one of our in-person gatherings. We're at 5601 West Clearwater Avenue, Suite 103 in Kennewick every Sunday at 10 a.m. Thanks again for watching today, and remember, as a believer, we don't have to worry about our daily needs because we have a Heavenly Father who knows what we need and is ready and willing to meet those needs. So seek to know Him more, pursue a relationship with Him, and let Him take care of you.